Right, in today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at this Grundig mini HiFi system. I'll just pop it out of the way over here for the moment though, because before I go into that, there's just something else I want to mention. Of course, the Grundig that this relates to is not the Grundig of the 1960s. This is not something made in Germany. It's a little budget thing. Suggested to me by a viewer, this one. Forgot the chap's name, but he said it might be worth me taking a look at this just to see how bad it is. You know, that's the kind of angle we're taking on this. Hopefully it'll prove me wrong. But on the front of it, it says it does cassette, Bluetooth, USB and SD card. No mention of CD on here. In fact, no mention of radio either. And that's what I thought, what's going on? A mini system that the only thing it can play is cassettes. And then the other thing that also interested me about this, it obviously has some kind of soft touch controls on here. So it looks like it's a cassette deck with soft touch controls. Now that doesn't mean it's a better deck than all those others we've seen that are based on that Tenashin type mechanism, the same mech that's in everything. You can control one of those mechs with a cam and have soft touch controls, but it's still the same mech at the end of it. You're just controlling it instead of pushing physical piano keys with servos and things. But anyway, I managed to find on this side, once I got it, two-way loudspeaker, 10 watt output, Bluetooth 4.2, and then it says CDR/CDRW playback. It obviously does take CDs somehow, and then cassette deck and 40 FM station presets and all that. So in reality, it's not as weird as I originally thought. It's a FM radio, a CD, and a cassette deck in one thing with Bluetooth and an SD card and a USB slot. Just weird how it highlights the cassette as the major feature. Maybe you're just supposed to assume that this takes CDs, but I didn't when I looked at it. Anyway, I've got it now. Let's open it up and see if it really does do all those things, or if it is really just a cassette deck. I think it's going to do all of them, isn't it? But also, we'll find out how terrible it is. Now, I should mention that I bought this from Amazon Germany. It cost me the equivalent of around about 100 UK pounds, which of course is not a lot for all the features we've got in here. So we shouldn't expect too much, but it'd be good if it was all right, wouldn't it? I mean, for £100, if you could get your grandma or your auntie or someone a little hi-fi unit to play their old cassettes and CDs and what have you, they'd be probably quite happy with this, just as long as the sound isn't terrible. That's the main thing. Let's see what we've got. Oh, remote control there. It's a fully featured one as well. It's got all the buttons on it. That's the main unit. It doesn't feel, look at that. Wow, it weighs next to nothing. It's hard to believe there's anything inside that at all. In fact, I think the speaker's just a tiny bit less in weight. These don't feel too bad, really. Okay, so here's what was inside the box, and first impressions really quite positive, because despite the fact that this is very much a budget device, they haven't cut every possible corner in an attempt to save costs. For example, we've got a 3.5mm patch lead here. This will go in the auxiliary input on the back and into a source device, say like a phone with a headphone output or whatever. Well, they didn't need to include that, so that's nice. We've got a couple of AAA batteries for the remote control. We've got a FM antenna. This is your standard figure of 8 power lead here with a Euro plug on. Of course, I'll swap that out for a UK one because as it isn't a wire that's permanently attached, it's easy to swap it out. Again, if they were trying to save money, they could have just had a wire that came out of the back of this. Same way with the speakers. We've got proper separate speaker wires here, and on the back of the speakers, we've got spring clip terminals. Now, these are obviously quite lightweight. There's some kind of wooden compound type thing, chipboard, but down at the bottom here it says it's the MS300 speaker, 4 ohm, 5 watt, and of course made in the People's Republic of China. But this is the bit that feels a little bit cheaper than I was expecting. Well, quite a bit. I mean, it really doesn't weigh very much at all, that. But just looking around the back, there's our speaker terminals, auxiliary input, antenna output, input for the FM, and then the power lead at the bottom there. And if I flip it over, we've got rubber feet as we have on the other devices here. Now, let's just have a look on the front of this to see what's behind this section. It says open at the bottom there. Disappointing. Look at that. Piano keys for the cassette deck. Here's me thinking it's soft touch. Getting all excited, thinking, oh look, a soft touch cassette deck, and it's just the usual rubbish, isn't it? Does that even have an eject button there? Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, it's our old friend, I'm afraid. Yeah, And it's also got a permanent erase magnet. You see the blue thing down there? You don't want a permanent erase magnet. It just creates really noisy recordings. So it's going to be pretty poor at recording. Hopefully it's reasonable at playback. I can see we've got a stereo head in the bottom of there though, so at least that's something. But yeah, that's a disappointment. I really was hoping it was a soft touch thing. But hey, we've got some fun here. There's a guy that complains when I do this. I've seen him in the comments and he gets really upset by it. So this is for him.
Oh yeah, that's it. Take it off.
You're welcome. Reasonable length of speaker cable there, very thin of course, but I don't think that's going to matter. We're not talking audiophile quality here, so it enables you to space the speakers out quite away from the central unit, which is pretty good. I've realised one disadvantage of that amount of wire though, it's trying to hide it around the back of course. We've got nowhere to wrap it up on the speakers. You'd have to tie it up with some cable ties or something. I've got to say this remote resembles one I've seen before in something I reviewed. It's just this fake brushed metal that's made out of plastic and this layout. Of course, there's different things on the buttons, but just I'm sure it's probably come from the same factory. Now, as far as the instructions go, German, English and French in there, so you've got no worries about importing this one from Amazon in Germany to the UK if you did want one, but we'll find out whether you do now because I'll switch it on. Right, well the plug's on, so let's press the on button. Oh, that's dim. I hope that's adjustable. Dimmer. Right, let's try that. Well, at its brightest, it's not that bright. Now I can see that there's a lot more buttons on this remote than there are on the front of this, and there aren't any hidden behind panels other than those cassette deck ones, so you're expected to use that remote for quite a few things, but I think we can choose the different options here. So we're on FM now. Ah, there we go. Right.
You ever think of those other men?
Now it is just an FM radio, there's no AM, there's no DAB. There are other models in the Grundig Micro HiFi range that do have DAB, but not in this style. But let's just put the radio on for a second.
It's different. I love the excitement. Wondering if it'll be a fun evening or a bad date that you'll laugh about in the...
Now, one thing I've noticed straight off, there's no mute button on the front there. I would have liked to have pressed that then. It sounded all right, actually, not too bad. It's not bassy, kind of a bit muffled, but definitely not tinny. So that's something. Let's pop a cassette in it. Oh, no, that sounds terrible. It's cutting in and out. It's like the azimuth is completely off. It's like the head isn't aligned. Also very hissy, that. Hard to press these when you think about it, because I'm pushing a button here that pushes the whole thing backwards. I'm pushing sort of that way. You shouldn't really be pushing down. And as a result, you kind of end up holding on this flap here at the bottom, and that's probably not a good idea. That'll snap off. Yeah, so cassette's definitely a... Whoa, an afterthought here. I'll try some more cassettes in a bit. I'm just checking my tape to see it's not chewing it up. That sounded terrible. Yeah, we'll have to use some more test tapes later on that one. Now, the thing is, where is the CD player in this one? That's your next question. I mean, it's not there, is it? That's your cassette deck, and it doesn't look like there's anywhere for it, but here it is. It's one of those little thin ones that you get in like a computer, a laptop or whatever. So, oh, that's a bit sharp there. Okay, well, I'll put a disc in it. Got a mute button on the remote control, fortunately, and overall, as far as the sound quality goes, at moderate volumes, if I'm being charitable, it really doesn't sound all that bad. I think we're getting much better quality of sound for the money in something like this than we would in a modern day boombox that costs the same amount. And I've paid a lot more for boomboxes that sound a lot worse than this that have been made recently. Disappointed so far with that cassette deck. I'm going to run that in a little bit, see if it improves at all. And as far as the FM radio goes, that's fine. It seems to pick up the signal reasonably well in here. And one thing I will mention, on the remote here, you see we've got pop, rock, classic and flat. I've tried those different modes. I think I prefer it in flat, but it's interesting to see that they're on these controls here, which would traditionally be like a volume control or something. So you can see this is a reused remote control that would be featured elsewhere. In fact, where is the volume control on here? I've got a mute. Oh, there's the volume in the middle. Doh. Okay, right, well, let's move on and try some MP3s in this. So I've got a disc that I call my file type test. On this one, I've got some MP3s, I've got FLAC, I've got WAVE. I just like to run it through and see which ones it can recognise. So let's have a look. That screen is really quite dim, isn't it? I mean, that's at its brightest setting as well. So it's loading the CD at the moment. Okay, well that's my left to right test, and the things are in the right position, so that's good. Now this is an MP3, and that might be all it plays. Actually, that was an MP3 as well, and then I think track 4 onwards are different file formats. Oh, I'll have to look what 4 is and then get back to you on that one. Well, I should have RTFM because the information is all here in the manual. The CD, that supports the file types of, well, of course, CD audio, but in addition to that, MP3 and WMA, which is to be expected. But then when we go onto the SD and USB function, if we're going to there, we can go with MP3s all the way up to 448 kilobits a second, and of course that will do WMA as well. But it also takes WAV files. It'll play those up to 3072 kilobits a second, and surprisingly, FLAC files up to 48 kilohertz 16-bit. Okay, now this cassette deck sounds absolutely terrible. I mean, this mechanism, it never sounds any good to me, but in this one it sounds worse than normal. In fact, I'm going to give you a bit of an audio demonstration later on, but I'm reluctant to play any proper tapes in here, any of my prize tapes, and especially this one, the Wow and Flutter tape. These things cost a lot, these properly calibrated Wow and Flutter tapes. I don't want to risk it, so I've got another idea. On this tape here, I've recorded a Wow and Flutter signal from this USB stick. So I've got a WAV file, 3 kilohertz tone. I'm going to play it now. Now you can hear it in the background there. And I'm going to play that through the headphone socket into my Wow and Flutter meter. And this thing, once it gets itself calibrated properly, will show that that 3 kilohertz tone is perfect on these meters, as it will be because it's a digital file. So it's got no Wow and Flutter on it. And then I'm going to record that off the USB stick onto the tape, play it back from the tape so we can see the variance between the original digital file and the playback. Now, normally you wouldn't do it this way. You'd normally use a properly calibrated tape. So what you're really doing is just demonstrating a properly calibrated tape being played back. In this case, by recording onto a tape and then playing it back, we're kind of doubling up the results in a way. But it also gives you a good demonstration of how bad things go, how far away they go from the original digital file. So I'm going to zoom you in on this so you can see what a 3 kilohertz tone looks like on the display, and then we'll swap over to the tape. Okay, so I mentioned before how the Wow and Flutter meter works. Quick recap though, you choose a 3 kilohertz or a 3.15 kilohertz tone, you play that into the input, and then the meter measures the variance against there. So in this case, as it is the original 3 kilohertz tone, there's no variance. I've got the meter set to their minimum here. So drift is the variance in the speed, dead center 0, perfect speed. Flutter, the needle's not moving around at all, even though I've got it set to the really sensitive one here, and that's because the audio isn't moving around at all. It's staying 3 kilohertz all the way through. So that's where it should be in the perfect world. Let's have a look what the tape does. Okay, we're in the cassette mode now. Let me just press play on that to check the audio's there. Yep, there it is. Plug the headphones in. Right. So these have gone off the scale, which is not unexpected. Let's just see where we should be with that. So let's move it to 1% on the speed. So we're looking at the top row. Okay, now on this occasion, the drift, the left-hand meter, the speed, it's pretty irrelevant. All it's really measuring is the difference between the playback and the record speed. Normally, you'd have that 3 kHz tone on the tape recorded at the perfect speed, or as close to it as you could get it. Then you'd play it back in here, and you'd see how far away from that this needle goes. But because we're using the same tape played in the same machine that it was recorded in, you're not going to get a proper result. So we'll just move over to the flutter. The flutter's the one where we're really noticing the audio just sounding weird. So let's bring this scale up a bit. 0.3% at the top. Yeah, still off the scale. 1% at the top. Yeah, still off the scale. 3% at the top. So now we're looking at that bottom row, and it's hanging around 1%. Wow and flutter. Now, as I say, we've kind of doubled up these results in a way, but this is an accurate representation of the variance away from that original 3 kHz tone that we recorded onto the tape. So it just sounds terrible. To give you a proper demonstration of that, you might want to listen to some music being played. So let's do that now. Right, so for the demonstration, I'm going to use this track here, Snowy Peaks Part 2, downloaded from the YouTube audio library. It's a 320 kilobits a second MP3. You'll just hear that on its own, first of all, nice and clean, although I'll stick some B-roll under it to give you something to look at. But then I'm going to play it back after that has been put on a USB stick, recorded onto the Grundig on a tape in there, and then played back from the tape out of the Grundig. So first off, the original file. Okay, so that was a tape that was both recorded and played back on the Grundig, but what if we had a tape that we've recorded elsewhere, the pre-recorded tape? What would that sound like when it's played back on the Grundig? Well, I've got a tape, a Type 1, that I've recorded on one of my other machines. Just to give you a demonstration as to what it sounds like before we play it in the Grundig, let me play it back through one of my better machines. Okay, so here's that same tape played back via the Grundig. Now it does have a clock on here. I'll just put it into standby. It appears when you're not using it, and the thing will automatically go into standby as well. There you go. You can set that to 12 or 24 hours. I've just reset it though, because earlier on I unplugged this thing, plugged it back in, and it didn't remember the time. So that's something to bear in mind. It only remembers it when it's in standby.
Right.
Just encountered a weird fault. I'm only getting audio out the right-hand side. Listen.
Right.
That should be alternating with left, and it's not there.
Right.
It only happened when I switched to the CD. So let's switch again. Maybe there's some weird fault with when you move between different sources. So let's go back to the CD again. Here we go.
Right.
There we go.
Right.
They're both there. That was a weird one. I mean, I don't even have a balance control on this thing. So the fact that that happened is a little bit odd. Anyway, going through the other features on here. So yeah, we've got the CD player. It works fine. It doesn't have CD text as you'd expect. However, it does draw the text through from MP3 files and other file types, and it's able to play and displays those on here. Something you don't always get on these really budget devices. They quite often just have the number for the file, But let's just go away from the CD. On the USB, again, you get the text information coming through from your MP3s. I haven't been able to get this to play FLACs. I've tried with the ones that I've got, but I haven't got too many, and perhaps they're in too high a bit rate or whatever for it. So I don't think anyone would be buying this to play FLAC files on. Oh yes, I only listen to lossless, but I do it through my £100 Grundig Micro System. Bluetooth, well, it works. I've connected my, my Walkman up to it here. Let's just press play on there. There we go. Oops, pressed it twice. So yeah. That's coming through. Let's see if we can control it from this end. Yep. I did have a few dropouts on this when I was recording it to the cassette. In the end, I did the cassette test using a wire in the back because this was just cutting out all the time. Not too sure what that's about, but I do have quite a lot of stuff in here that could interfere with Bluetooth. I'm going to say it's working, so you know, you'd probably get mixed results with that one. Auxiliary, no point plugging anything into the back to demonstrate it now, but it works fine. We've only got a auto level recording on this cassette though, and that does have an impact on the start of songs. You can hear it coming loud and then it's quickly reduced down. Very basic, of course, no manual level control on there, and obviously no Dolby noise reduction, no Type 2, Type 4 tapes, or any of that business. The cassette deck itself's pretty rubbish. The FM radio's working fine. It's pretty basic as far as the information goes. If I press the info button, we're just getting stereo and mono. We can have up to 40 presets on it though, if you can get 40 stations, and those are accessible via the keypad at the bottom here. You've also got the ability to shuffle the tracks on the CD, or repeat the current track or the whole album and do an A-B repeat as well. So overall it's a pretty well specified CD player other than the lack of CD text. Now just a word about the sound quality on this. It's surprisingly acceptable at moderate volumes. If you were just listening to your CDs or your FM radio on this, you had it on a bookshelf and you had it at a sensible volume, you'd be quite happy. You wouldn't notice any big deficiencies. It's only really when you start to crank it up or you're listening to bass heavy music that you notice that it is lacking quite a bit in that area. The bass, it really sounds quite closed in, sort of boxy, stuck in the speakers almost. It doesn't matter how far away you move the speakers from the centre bit, which is an advantage of this over a boombox, but yeah, the bass just doesn't seem to extend out beyond them. Now let's move on to the real conclusion of this video, because when I make videos there's always got to be a catch, there's got to be some angle on it, there's got to be something that's unusual and different and something that intrigues me. Now the thing that intrigued me about this, or at least I thought it would do, was the way that it was soft touch controls for a cassette deck in the modern age, and there aren't too many of those around. There's the Sony boombox from Japan that I reviewed, but you know, you don't get that very easily over here in the West. So I thought this might be a good thing to recommend if somebody, as they often do, gets in touch and says, oh, my grandma or my aunt just wants something basic to play cassettes or old tapes, and can you recommend something? And I would have recommended that Panasonic boombox, but that's now been discontinued. So I thought, well, maybe this would be an alternative. Soft touch controls, it might be acceptable. No, turns out the cassette part of this is terrible, and also it's just those old mechanical keys at the bottom. Once I'd opened that flap and saw that, my heart sank and my interest sank with it, because I thought, nah, not interested anymore. It's not what I thought it was. They did a good job of concealing it, hiding the little CD player in here, hiding the buttons down at the bottom, but once you get it and you open it up, you kind of go, oh, is that what it is? Didn't think it was that bad. And of course, you can't operate the cassette from the remote either, which you would have been able to do if it had soft touch controls. But overall, the cassette mechanism, you don't want to operate it anyway. It sounds terrible, as we heard earlier on. I'm sure you could tell from those recordings I did and playing things back that you don't want to listen to your tapes on here. I do worry about tapes even being played in this. So take away the cassette part of this and then you're left with a FM radio, MP3 player, Bluetooth, CD thingamajig. There are plenty of those around, and I'm sure there are a lot better ones than this. In fact, even in the Grundig range, there are ones with DAB radio on and things that really just sort of the top bit without the cassette. You'd be much better off with one of those than this. There'll be affiliate links in the video description if you disagree. I mean, whenever I've featured anything that I think is a bit rubbish in one respect, I will get a lot of people that always jump to the defence of it and say, oh, maybe yours has got a faulty cassette deck. It'll be that old. You know, maybe yours is faulty. The number of times I've heard that, I must be the most unlucky person in the world for buying faulty equipment, because pretty much everything I've ever bought and said is a bit rubbish, it was faulty on mine. So if you believe that, buy one of these, and then you can try pressing the buttons on your cassette deck without moving the thing halfway across your counter. Yeah, your choice anyway. But yeah, that's this. I don't care about it anymore. So let's just finish the video here. Sorry about that. Can't win them all, can you? Maybe I'll have to pay closer attention to the pictures in things in the future, but I bought it a bit late at night. I thought, oh, that'll do. No, it won't. Anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.